Hello, whole list. It's Dr. Hammerstead here, as always, your guide to navigate your way to your whole you. I'm an emergency physician, lifestyle medicine physician, meaning I love to use evidence to prescribe and coach lifestyle changes to recreate your best you, food, sleep, exercise, weight, stress management, all of it to prevent and reverse disease. And with that, I love to curate other experts together so we can all empower each other and lift each other up. And today is no different. I have Dr. Ruchi Puri here. She is an OBGYN by conventional medical training practicing in San Francisco, California. She is also, like me, a global health physician. But today she's here to talk about a different type of service she has, really interesting parallel track, coaching and practicing in Ayurvedic health and her own version of her whole you, biology, coaching around healing and health in a unique perspective. So welcome, Ruchi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So you have a beautiful phrase that I invited you on to dig into today, the architecture and alchemy of healing. And I just love it. I want to say it over and over. So tell me what that means to you.
Yeah, I realized as I dabbled outside of medicine and the paradigm of medicine and explored other healing modalities that, we as human beings, we have an architecture to us that is much more than our muscles and our bones and our organs and these different systems that make up our physical body. There's um, there's a more complex system where our emotional body lives and our belief systems and our thoughts and right down to our energy and our soul. And that's part of the architecture of being human. And it's so much deeper than just, again, like the anatomy that we learn in medical school. And then the alchemy for me is the chemistry of how these different dimensions of the human body and the human persona, how they mix together and what happens, the effect of our emotions on our physical health and our ideas and our belief systems and our physical health, and even, on a very deeper level, our soul and our spirit. And when someone says like that was soul crushing, that it's not just soul crushing, it can be body crushing too. And what is the chemistry between these dynamics? And so that's the alchemy. And I feel like it's really important to broaden our operating understanding of what it is to be human, which leads into my term biology. But I think it's important because, healing's become a really saturated space. There's a lot of tools in that box these days, from going to your therapist, to your Ayurvedic doctor, to your medical doctor, to your chiropractor, you name it. That is a very large directory of tools. And I think there's a way that those different tools can work for us in our healing journey. And that's the alchemistic part of it. And how do you know which tool to access if you don't really have a good understanding of your architecture?
Right.
It's arrive at that phrase.
It's so important. I think people, we talk about mind body stuff all the time, but we don't really get into the meat of it, right? Like, oh, it's all like, you go to the doctor and they say, well, it's stress related. And you're saying, are you calling me crazy? And like, no, we're just saying that our bodies and our minds are intricately together. And I think the more that we bring this up as physicians and are talking more about kind of the art of medicine, the alchemy that is our bodies, right? And then people can start to get that in mind a little bit better for themselves.
And there's something like really unprecise about that word. Well, stress, that's like, it's like when the doctor says like, oh, you're sick from congestive heart failure. Well, there's about 80 different things that lead into congestive heart failure. Just like there's like stress is a big bucket of stuff, like what are the biomechanics of stress, and how is that it like impacts us? Like, stress is like a big term. Stress is like pain, it's too broad. It kind of lacks the specificity I think we need to, if we're really going to de-stress.
Yeah.
And if we're really going to pinpoint the stressors that are making us ill. And I think that it's time for us to start breaking that down. And it's also the art of healing. Like, what is this magic art of healing? And why is it that some physicians seem to have it and some physicians don't? Like, where can we break down the art of healing? And I think this is what I'm hoping to do in my understanding of the architecture and alchemy of healing, and the fact that we just need a new word for the study of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk some about, creating unique prescriptions for healing and journeys to wellness. Talk to us about like kind of how you think through that when you're working with a patient.
Yeah, so this is where both Ayurvedic medicine and traditional Chinese medicine really opened the door of me being like, oh, we are all fundamentally unique. Like, it's interesting that like you can write a pill prescription and it might only impact, 30 to 40 to some percentage of people, but it doesn't work for everybody. And what is that? What's that? Where's it becoming a miss for us? And it occurred to me, like, we're just, in those systems we talk about kind of these unique patterns that people have. And that makes sense even in a spiritual sense. Like, we have a soul, like everybody's soul's purpose is unique, that there's something in our uniqueness that is in our soul as well. And so this is where I kind of begin. It's like, it's not a one diet fits all kind of prescription. And so there are kind of processes of understanding in like the Ayurvedic system, through understanding that everybody has a unique constitution and it comes together from these different doshas or humors, and we're kind of we're our own unique recipe in that way. It's like kind of like chocolate cake. Like, some of us are light, fluffy, multi-layered chocolate cakes, and some of us are yeah, like a dense tort, and it's all kind of chocolate cake. But again, it's like there's this there's a different way, there's a different level of detail and specificity around approaching that, not just in our physical makeup, which is something that Ayurvedic medicine helps do really explicitly across, like, people talk about the body types, big bone, little bone, pear shape, apple shape. Ayurvedic medicine has a great kind of paradigm or structure around that. Traditional Chinese medicine does it through the elements. So, like, this idea through the 5 elements that we are the living universe, and all the elements that are around the earth in the environment of in our environment are also in us, so that in a way, like, we are the planet. Like, we're not on the planet, we are the planet. And so, but yet there's, like, there are parts of it that are more mountainous, some places that are more woody, there are places that are more water and ocean, and so that system has a way of presenting that flavor. And in a lot of the spiritual systems, I think, where you inherently understand that each soul is its own unique blueprint or unique essence, and we all have a soul, and where that also informs this unique kind of genetic phenotypic expression that we take. And so for me, it's like really to touch into using these different systems to understand, how unique is Heather, is how Heather is unique from Ruchi.
Yeah. Yeah.
Using those various systems to distill them out, because each system then informs a little bit about what kind of a lifestyle is healthier. Like, some people they're designed for a fast-paced, hectic lifestyle, and some people are really designed to be homebodies. And where you kind of have to touch on, like, what's your natural rhythm. And I think, as I've worked with clients and patients over the years, that when we legitimize that for people and we educate from that place, that people stop trying to compare themselves to the Joneses and actually can fully step into what they're already naturally feeling about themselves.
Right. Yeah.
And we honor that, and we don't try to impose a certain way of being that is not intrinsic or natural for our individual patients. And that is in it when we do that, that does create a stress.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a, like I said, it's a really powerful and important conversation to be having because, you know, in medicine, we've always just had these, you know, compliant patients who just did what we told them to do, but that's not how health happens, right? I mean, health happens in real life, real time. You have to be an active participant in your care. And if you understand that you are unique prescriptive person, right? That not everything's going to work for you, then you've got to do some work to figure out what that is. And we talk about, you know, epigenetics and genetics and how, you know, genetics is really only 10% of what your illnesses or health or wellness is going to be. And 90% of it is the environmental influences around you that unmask or kind of modify that gene expression that could become disease or lack of disease. And what you're talking about here is just that, right? It's utilizing all of the things around you in your environment that make you you, and figuring out a way to leverage that for better health. And I love that. I love that with your biology.
Yeah, and I think it's about helping people understand that there's a version of life where you're like in your flow. And part of that is where you start honoring your own uniqueness and your own internal wisdom, and that the things that you should or supposed to be doing, they are not, they don't exclusively live in an intellectual analytic space. There's sometimes when like it just doesn't feel right.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about unpacking and listening to the that it doesn't feel like it just doesn't feel right. And when we start having cravings for things, where's that craving coming from? Is that craving coming from a aligned whole place in us? Or is that craving really a subtle intelligence saying us like saying to us like, you know, you're not getting enough vitamin D, you're not getting enough iron. And how do we start listening to ourselves? And I think this comes back to something that's really important these days about mindfulness and presence, and where I use the term like self-contact. You know, how much of us are really have a good relationship with ourselves internally? And where that's really so fundamental and foundational, because when you are not in we're not really listening to yourself and feeling yourself and hearing yourself, and all the ways that we have these internal cries for help that go unexpressed, these are the early fissures in the foundation of our physical body.
Mm.
And we've become so overwhelmed, and in the overwhelming of the reality of modern life, um, we've stopped, as a coping mechanism, we've stopped listening to that inner voice, that inner wisdom, because like the news is scary, work is demanding, we're afraid that we're not going to succeed in existing and surviving in terms of like paying our bills, um, having maintaining a certain like quality of lifestyle. I mean, all of these things have become so much to digest in a moment that we've just cut off the alarm bells that are going on inside of us, and we chalk it up. And especially I think there's this thing for women that like, oh, it's my hormones, like I get my period and my hormones go crazy, because we think that all of a sudden our experience in our outer world gets too overwhelming, that we can't be in our inner experience. And again, these are the early cracks in the foundation where all of a sudden things start crumbling, until they crumble so much that the doctor finally says, oh, your labs are abnormal, you know. But there was a lot going on before the abnormal lab showed up. And I think a lot of times patients go and reach out to their doctors, and we don't know what to say to them because the labs are normal, the tests are normal, and it kind of takes a certain amount of crumbling before we can offer up help. And in that space of that crumbling, Mwah. There's a lot of resources before that happens. Like the house doesn't be on fire before you do something. And when the house is on fire, you call, and this is where I think the alchemy comes in. When the house is on fire, yeah, you're going to call the fire.
Yeah, you call your team.
You're going to call the fire team. But who do you call, who do you call when the electricity is wonky? You call an electrician, but you have to recognize that the electricity in the house is a little bit wonky now. And this goes because you understand the architecture of your house. And as human beings, we're no different. We're more complicated than a house because we're living organisms.
Yeah. And what I think we can do a lot better as physicians is listening to people when they have the gumption to tell us that they think something is wrong, right? Because it takes a lot for someone to reach out for help or to say something that they can't quite put their fingers on what it is. And to have many of us in medicine just sort of blow it off, right?
Well, and it's not that we're blowing it off because we're bad people. We're blowing it off because we grew up in a system that doesn't have a response. Like we weren't given those. Those were not the things that we learned about in medical school. Like those were not tools that were part of our training in school and residency. And then as the health system has got more complicated, the commodity of time and just natural human relationship, man, that got expensive, and it's fallen through the way, it's just fallen to the wayside. It's fallen through the cracks. And this is where other modalities of healing are really good, because they already teach you about what it is to be as I don't like the word healer so much, but as somebody who is helping somebody in their healing or their wellness, to really be what it is to really be present, what it is to listen, and not just listen to the words, but listen using other skill sets around what is going on, and listening to the emotions. And that sometimes the emotions are really suppressed, especially we coming out of an era of our human development where it was not okay to feel. It was not okay. Anger was bad. Sadness is bad. Fear is bad. And those fundamental primary color of emotions, they have been heavily suppressed. And so there's some people who don't even know how to feel, or they have judgments and belief systems around feeling that don't allow them to come out. And so when someone comes into the office and the first thing you say to them sends them off crying, I mean, it makes the doctor a little persona non grata. And many of us are afraid to go there for many reasons. And so the whole thing has just kind of gotten stuck like a contracture and a constriction. And I think this is one of the important things that has to come back online if we're really going to help people be in their full potential, which is to be well.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about where our viewers can find you.
Well, I have a website. It's www.ruchipuri.com. I have a blog called Unveiling Being, where I try to deconstruct where our physical, emotional, spiritual, and selves meet into this being human. And I work with clients one-on-one. And in this coming year, you'll have a series of online workshop or online courses that you can take, especially for women during key reproductive health transitions during their lifetimes. Look at these things in a deeper way.
Awesome. That's great. Well, here at Holist, we're all about teamwork and, building each other's building each other up by using, the various aspects of health and wellness all together. And so really happy to have you here. Please drop your information into the comments so that people can find you. And thanks for everything that you do and for starting these really important conversations.
Yeah, and again, thanks for having me. It's going to be a team effort if we're going to, restore like the, where healthcare is the immune system for of humanity, and so I think it's going to take a lot of us rolling up our sleeves to really
break it down and build it back up. Yep. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.